No.
Yes. Right.
So you guys need an alignment, not coaching.
The coaching industry has exploded.
We want to be better. We want to move forward and keep growing.
Uncoachable is going to be released every single month with a new coach, a new idea, a new approach, and a new takeaway. Hi, I'm Jon.
I'm Rhys.
And he's uncoachable.
Hello, welcome to Uncoachable. My name is Rhys, and with me is Jon.
Hello, hello.
This is the way you speak.
Right, thank you.
And with us is Dave Reynolds. Dave, thank you for coming on Uncoachable.
It's a pleasure. I was excited when the opportunity came up, and I loved the title right away. So I was like, absolutely, sign me up.
The whole idea is the only thing that Rhys and I really do agree on is the fact that both of us are uncoachable. Completely different reasons, but that's a consensus that we now have.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this whole show is like a quest for us to like make ourselves uncomfortable, like meet people who do coaching for us to kind of go, well, surely there's enough people out there that we're going to pick things up or at least start to identify ways that we can grow and get better as entrepreneurs. But coming from a point of skepticism, I think the more people you speak to, the better, because you get a wide range of perspectives. So
Agreed.
Yeah. I think that's where we want to start. There's a little bit of a defense on this because we've looked at the industry and it's absolutely exploded. And there are really qualified coaches and leaders and instructors and trainers and mentors. And then there's not. And the challenge is that for us, we're trying to figure out, well, which path do you go down? How do we know which road we're taking, right?
yeah.
Well, so I'll even say when I first started getting into coaching was almost a dirty name. Do you know what I mean? Like, because so many people were doing it. So I was like, do I say coach? Do I say consultant? And I think that's an interesting area when you guys get into it.
Because it was the same for us with podcasting. We've said this before. There's so many people who like say, hey, we sell podcast consulting services. There's no qualification or, it's not like being a doctor or a bus driver where you need certain kind of qualifications and training, I guess. So how about you kind of give us a pitch about who you are and like what you do as a coach or what your technique or your style or approach is that you think this kind of really makes you stand out, I guess. Yeah.
So I would say we're a growth consulting firm, but we focus a lot on executive coaching. We've been doing it for about 8 years, but honestly, probably 20 plus years because I've had multiple businesses. We've grown and scaled sales teams, but predominantly we take clients from where they are to where they want to go and help them build the steps in between. So we always go back to the growth consulting firm because everything we do is focused on growth. But the easiest way to kind of talk about us as a consultancy and working with clients is we treat every client like a puzzle. So, when you dump a puzzle on the table, like half those pieces aren't flipped over. Well, we leverage questions, like kind of like Socratic, to flip those pieces over because every client is, a different puzzle. And we have to start piecing those parts together with the client instead of for the client. And I think that's what makes us unique is the questions that we ask, because we get a lot of times where people are going, I've never been asked that before. Or they've thought about it, but they've never talked about it. So just getting clients to kind of increase their level of self-awareness has been huge for us.
Did you say Socratic?
Socratic.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, Socratic, we always lean into this because I would say the reason why we're industry agnostic, so we work with McGinnis Cooper, Steel Auto Group, that strategy, is that sometimes the less we know, the more we can help. So what we do is we come in with a really well-designed set of questions so we can start flipping some of those pieces over. So instead of coming in and kind of identifying a couple things, making some assumptions and prescribing a solution, we leverage questions as kind of like almost like keys to doors that have never been opened before. And we allow that process with clients to kind of go on that journey together. And the beauty with asking a question is that when I ask a question, you answer it, you own the response. You're putting more accountability around how you're leaning into the process.
Right. I actually see a problem right there.
I was going to go.
I didn't want to.
I was going to say you're leading into like philosophy, and that's interesting.
I thought that was my minor, and I didn't want to go that route. But it is the dumping of the pieces all onto the table, flipping them over. The challenge with Rhys and I is it's like doing that puzzle piece, but without the box. You have no idea what the image is, and he and I define ourselves as being unboxable. No,
I'd say you've got a puzzle which is like a nice, like maybe like Edwardian era painting of like an English country scene. And then you've got one that is just like baked beans, those really difficult baked beans puzzles. And someone just mixed them together and shook a box.
Yeah.
And then I feel like that's us.
Wait. You're the baked beans in this, right?
No, you're the baked beans. So I guess see what you're saying at is that we're both very different people.
Yeah.
So how do you do that when you feel like there's two puzzles mixed together?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were actually just talking to a potential new client this morning, and they're two very different entrepreneurs. And part of it was we have to identify, how do you make decisions together? And so what we did was we were asking questions like, what problems do you like to solve? But I said, how do you guys solve problems together? So us starting to actually identify how you guys work together is part of the coaching process. So when we start flipping some of those pieces and ask the question, we try and get two perspectives, but we look at what's the collaborative approach of you guys doing that together. Because there has to be, that bought-in strategy working together collaboratively.
Mm.
Yeah. When did you guys get to the point where you said, we think we're uncoachable?
Oh, that's a good question.
Do you know what I
see?
It's
here's
interesting.
a question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but so like most business partners, you start when you find all of the commonalities,
Yeah.
and those are the easy stages when you're actually saying, okay, we've got this in common, we've got this direction, and then you get to the point where you go, wow, I recognize all the differences that do complement each other to make a better, whole or better unit. That works really well, and then you get to a point going, what are we not? What are we missing? What do we don't know? Right?
Yeah.
And that's where we started to say, let's see if we can get a little bit of help in a different direction. Because when you say, as a growth strategist, trying to figure out what growth looks like, he and I have different approaches of what that means. Right? It's not necessarily revenue. It's not more free time. It's not maybe it's bigger clients. It's all of those things. And I don't think we've got consensus on what growth looks like either. Right?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you're a guest. You go ahead.
Oh. So I'm always curious, a big part of it is like establishing a goal, building a plan, having a success metric or a measurement system. Do you guys agree on the same goal of where you want to go?
We haven't. Do you know what people say to us? What's your 5-year plan? And we just both go, well, we're having fun right now. So,
yeah. Well, it's funny. We were doing a little bit of research on you as well, which is you. I think there was a session in your book that talks a little bit about the best boss you had and the worst boss you had.
Yeah.
I think vice versa. And he and I struggle with both of those notions about the worst boss, right? As entrepreneurs for ages, for us, it is part of that. It's all about the journey for us as an entrepreneur. We're not at a point where we're going, what's that end destination? We're still enjoying this process, right? So we're having a hard time trying to define what that end looks like, I guess.
Yeah, neither of us want to get off the ride yet. But I suppose neither of us have thought about getting off the ride yet. But we will want candy floss soon. So we're going to have to get off the ride eventually.
I like that. Is growth a priority for you?
Yes, it is for me.
Okay.
It is for me too. It makes it seem like I don't want to just like turn up at work and just stay static.
No, so I like bigger teams, and a broader set of services and skills as a bigger organization. So growth to me is typically it may be a different footprint, a different size, right?
Growth to me is faster Mustangs.
That'll do it.
Joking.
You'll get there faster.
No, I think we built this company in a sense where just wanted a work environment where we did good work we could be proud of, and there was a culture that we really enjoyed and we wanted to come to work to, because we both, like Jon's alluded to, we had those bad experiences and we wanted to kind of create somewhere that was just like, this feels right and this isn't a chore. This is just like the funnest job. And things will get difficult with clients and like things in business things change and things can be uncertain, but at least everything else, like the world that is happening in, is surrounded with good people doing good work and with good intentions. So and as long as we can keep that going, I'm happy. So
that's huge. If you love what you're doing already, it's a matter of also too, what does the next version of that look like? So I think one of the things we were having a conversation about this with another client this morning around how is your business evolving? So we kind of pair that with growth. What do you guys see as the next step for evolution?
I'm looking at Jon because I don't know.
I'm actually trying to figure out the quote that Rhys used to use about if you love what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life. But I can't remember what the quote was. Oh, it's actually that. That's the quote. Isn't
I
it?
think that is.
It's a great way to reveal a quote.
Right.
I got a question for you about, so
Please.
The angle you said about the idea that, the true wisdom is knowing you know nothing, and come into like a business just with questions rather than go in.
Yeah.
You're not trying to trick people into thinking that hey, listen, I've seen it all before, I've done it all before, I've got all the answers. How do you feel about those people who don't have the same approach where you're like, we have a process, we have a methodology, and then we adapt it to fit as you turn those pieces over? I suppose that can be the only grown-up approach to doing this, because I've been approached to people who have, tried to pull that one.
Yeah. So here's the challenge I find when sometimes people are coming in with, you have to follow our process, or everybody's getting the same path that we're going down. I find there's just too much assumptions through the process of what a person knows and what they don't know.
Yeah.
The advantage of me being curious. So I used to almost lean into the idea of being a curious coach, because we're trying to figure this out together and find out what you know that's not in a system. So that's one of the key parts, is that I'm a big believer that most people that we coach already generally have the answers. They just don't have them in a system. So a big part of our core principles are consistency, discipline, and standards. So we try and find out what's consistent in your business, what's not, what's discipline in your business, what's not, and where are your standards? Because most times they get negotiated. So we find out, do we have non-negotiables? So almost getting back to that point, like when we worked with law firms, working with lawyers, we were really just more picking the brain of what do they know they should be doing that they're making a decision not to do? And if they were doing it, would see more growth. So it's a matter of like, how do we take what they already have and put it into a repeatable system? Versus me coming in and saying, like, say I was in the industry for 10 years, I would come in with a bias and say, I've seen how it's been done. I see what success looks like. You just need to do this. But the problem is then I own the strategy, not them.
Yeah.
So by being curious and kind of peeling back the layers, and almost like me learning from my clients, we kind of do it together, and they make an identified area of like, this is what I think the next step needs to be. Because they've probably already said it in their head. It's a matter of us agreeing on what's that one next step we need to make.
That must be intimidating, going into a room full of lawyers and starting that process of going, right, I'm going to help you be better. And like knowing their knowledge and expertise is like so detailed in areas that most people don't ever think about.
A big time. Honestly, it was probably the area we get challenged most. And luckily we had an inside person that kind of advocated for what we did. And it was really going, well, how are you going to come in and tell a lawyer what they need to do better? You don't have a law degree. And really what we said is, well, do we agree that they're all smart individuals? And like the agreement was there. It's saying, do we feel like they could have better systems to execute on what they already know? And they're like, yeah. And the reason why we were being hired is because a lot of people wanted to become partner, but they weren't bringing work in. We're really good at business development. So they were used to getting work, but not going in to get it. So what we're doing is re-changing their paradigm to saying, okay, instead of waiting for the work, how can we get you to think more proactively on using your non-billable time to pull in billable time? So it was really, they saw the value in our service, but getting people to grow the business at a different rate.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think, so the key to me, it sounds like it's not the knowledge about the industry that makes you successful. It's asking the right questions and allowing them to be able to gear that around a different structure. So systems, or a system engineer to a degree, right?
You're 100% right. And I think that one thing I try and agree with clients on is that we probably have already thought of the solutions that we want to implement. We just have circled the drain on doing them. Right. So we go, okay, what's in the parking lot? So it's always those ideas that you've always thought about doing, but you never did. It's a matter of what's holding us back from going there. I would say that was the other part about kind of what you're mentioning, is that we're probably the best at getting people to take action. And that's what we really pride ourselves. So if it typically takes this much time for somebody to do something, we try to really get them to take action, make that big leap right away, but in an A to B approach versus throwing A to Z at them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So now, what you know about us, what little you know about us, where would our starting point be with you?
So something we share in the book, and it's really part of our process, we have kind of 5 stages that we take people through, and that would be discovery, awareness, focus, commitment, and follow-up. And it's kind of how this whole system goes together, but every single client starts in the same stage, and it's discovery. We need to go to that puzzle and start flipping pieces over, whether there's beans or there's a beautiful picture. And it's a matter of us getting it all on the table. And it's really interesting because I don't think we've ever been in a discovery session before where somebody said, I've never been asked that question before. And so you have to really kind of find those truths. And people are so used to getting away with surface level responses. So you'll ask a question and we'll walk into a sales room and I'll say, hey, how are sales? And they'll say, oh, the sales are good. And you walk by and saying, well, what does good mean? Where are you at today? And we'll kind of dig in. We always dig deeper in the discovery stage. So sometimes we get to kind of the roots versus the symptoms. And once we start getting that, we start kind of pulling the systems together to identify what's the entrepreneur self-aware of and what are they not self-aware of.
Yeah.
And so what we do is when we realize there's kind of some pockets or some gaps, we have to try and like curve that towards. So we might know the strategy and say, hey, I need Rhys to realize this is the challenge, but he's not owning it. So I'll prescribe the questions and kind of customize them in a way that you kind of have those aha moments and like lean into the process. And then we get you to focus and make commitment.
Right.
If you did that process, you'd find loads of those.
I was just trying to think back to the legal example where from a growth standpoint, you're looking from a sales, revenue, et cetera. Some of the lawyers that may not have necessarily been bringing in business. What happens if you have, say, like a hypothetical founder that is a really good, creative, but wants to lean into more sales, and they may not have the skills required to be really good at sales. They're phenomenal at marketing.
Yep.
I mean, hypothetical scenario, but the focus on a close might not be a priority. How would you approach that?
Yeah. So I
Thanks,
think,
Jon.
What? No, hypothetical. I said hypothetical, and no offense, but
yeah, I think that there's always us identifying. It's kind of like always going back to university. It's like your SWOT analysis. It's also identifying like
you may need to break some acronyms down as well.
Strengths, weaknesses,
I've done a
opportunities, and
SWOT
threats.
analysis.
For me.
But I think it's also identifying why is it that the person wants to lean into sales? Why do they want to get better? Is it just because of growth focus, or is it that they're in an area that they're actually passionate about? What do they know? What don't they know? What's their current approach? And also too, like peeling back their layers. And sometimes a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not successful. It's not working. Sometimes we have to look at what's the approach, what's the steps, what's the follow-up. And a lot of times we get back to what's the discipline around sales? Because sales is more about education than it is about just pure persuasion. So a lot of people think that they need to sell. We actually help them go through the process of how do we become a better salesperson by asking better questions. So then the people that are being involved feel like they're part of the solution versus being sold the solution.
You keep coming back to this mastering the art of the question, I think.
Yeah.
Is that the language?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is as well is that, so like we have quite different backgrounds, I think, and in some ways very similar backgrounds. And a lot of like me doing sales is based on me just kind of like going, hey, I got a business. Do you want some business? And kind of just building like friendly relationships with people, word of mouth.
Yep.
But I do love the marketing side of things. I love that, creating the content. And it drives Jon mad because I'm just like,
Do you want to buy some business?
do you want to buy some
He's
business?
got the
Couple
fake
business,
Rolexes.
sir. Whereas Jon, you've had like sales training, you've run like sales teams, you've been through like processes within organizations.
I know you're
and
insulting me.
structures
I
and
can
stuff.
tell.
No, it's just like we just got different vibes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just get excited about the creative with people, and I think that's my strength is to be enthusiastic, to throw ideas around. I know that that's my strength when we're doing sales, but I do struggle more with the structure. But structure is something I struggle with across everything.
Mm-hmm.
I had a direction to the question that I rudely got interrupted. It is I've seen founders that inevitably are able to get back to their area of expertise or the thing that they really enjoyed. As entrepreneurs, you have a tendency to put on all the hats.
Yeah.
And then as you build really good teams around it, you then take the one that nobody wants or is a skill that's difficult to find. And I'm seeing entrepreneurs and founders eventually being able to step back and go, you know what, I'd like to just focus on the marketing of the company or just the finance of the company or the creative, whatever it is. So I don't know, from your standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, honed in on sales, revenue, growth, or are there other attributes like exit plans or exit strategies or?
Yeah. So we do like succession planning with a lot of organizations like Steel. We've done a vet strategy and multiple other organizations. So we cover like performance management, all those areas. But it almost come back to what you're hitting at exactly like, what are the things you want to focus on that have the highest return? So it's a question we obviously ask it's kind of like the Pareto principle. 20% of what you do gives you 80% of your results. So we'll always ask, what are the two behaviors that give you the highest return? So what's that one thing that you do? And for you, it could be sales. For you, it could be marketing. But it's a behavior. It's something that you're executing on.
Right.
But then sometimes we look at, well, you're doing 80% of these behaviors. They're getting 20% of your results. You're spinning your tires, getting back to the idea of you got to give up to go up when you're expanding your team. So it's a matter of honing in on your superpowers.
I like that a lot.
I keep telling him I'm a top of funnel guy. It's where I feel safe. It's where I feel safe.
I don't think you think the same thing of what a funnel is that I think a funnel is. No, but I love that where you're getting to. Like the challenge for most of us entrepreneurs, business owners, is that we are not focusing just on two things.
Yeah.
If we could just peel it all back and say, just focus on two things that generate 80% of our results, what are those two? And I think that's a great question to ask other people.
What about? I'm trying to think of something bad to say about you, and then do hypothetically. But does I'm too tired. No, I had a question for you. It was about terms of like coaching. When you've obviously coached lots of different kinds of people and personalities. Is there anyone you've ever gone, oh my God, I can't help this person, or where it's really been hard to build that puzzle?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of scenarios. And actually, the one that I would think about would be probably where we had one of the biggest breakthroughs. And it was actually in the law field. And it was an area where if people just don't come prepared, it's very difficult for me to do my role as a coach, because the coach really has to come in 100% committed, and so does the person we're coaching. So it has to go on both sides. And for a while, the person was showing up to check a box. They weren't there to actually like lean into the process because, again, somebody else in a firm is paying for it.
Okay, yeah.
And I get to a point where I said, hey, this isn't worth my time to spend time with you. And it was kind of a moment of the ego came in. It's like, whoa, how can you say that to me? And I said, well, you're showing up to check a box and I'm showing up to really help you change and makes transformation. And I laid out the list of all the things we committed to work on that nothing was executed on. And we challenge our customers all the time and our clients like that. And it was interesting because I thought it was going to be like, okay, move on, pick somebody else. And they just took immediate accountability and said, hey, you know what? You're right. I have been kind of wasting your time and I'm busy. I'm doing these things. And we figured out a system. How does it work? It's interesting. That guy ended up becoming a partner and really, really successful in the firm. When we started coaching, he was like, hey, we can start this, but to be honest, I have an engineering degree. I'm going to go back to engineering. I have just no interest in law anymore. And it was interesting. Like, the friction was what really created the transition.
That's cool. I think that's quite interesting, especially like, I think that I'm someone who enjoys uncertainty and it fuels me. And I can understand that perspective where they're like, hey, you challenge them and it's almost like they got their back up then. They were like, no, I'm going to be the best at this. I'm going to really like knuckle down and you're holding me accountable and you're seeing my bullshit. So yeah. I'm going to roll my sleeves up and like, yeah, I think that's very relatable for me. Is it relatable for you, Jon?
No, I'm still looking for more of a contrarian, somebody that wouldn't really get coached. Like, to me, the challenge, I don't know if I'd accept that as the challenge. You didn't show up. I often don't show up.
No,
right?
There's a thing we do in the office where everyone goes, "Where's Jon?"
No. I don't know where to go with that. I really don't. Yeah.
I would say, though, like a lot of times people will come in with an assumption that coaching is going to be a silver bullet. Like, as in, Dave's got this track record. He's going to come in. He's going to solve my problems. And they'll look at going, how do we quickly do it? And so typically our engagements are minimum 6 months. And I'll tell you why. Typically it takes about 90 days to see a result from a new behavior. And the next 90 days is focused on how do we systemize it so if we leave, the behaviors don't go away.
It's like building a habit, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My gut is the people that aren't showing up and that are difficult to coach, it's as you age, as you get older, those priorities shift. And my gut is that as soon as you get into a coaching structure for that individual, the engineer, / lawyer / engineer, was saying, no, I'm going to be an engineer when I grow up, for example. So as Rhys and I are going through our journey here, what we wanted to do 5 years ago versus what we're doing now versus what we're going to do in 5 years is probably a different roadmap, right? So that probably becomes the biggest challenge for us to say, yeah, I'm not going to lean into coaching now. I think I need it, but I don't know what it needs to be yet.
Yep.
And that's my gut on where we are struggling.
Yeah. Because it's like couples therapy.
His no is a high pitched that's how I know he's like, yeah. Right.
So do you think that like so like we're quite distinctive, different personalities, but our brains work totally differently. Have you ever been in that situation where you've been able to bring like that kind of diversity together?
Yeah, I think that you'd almost have to understand initially in that relationship, what's the role clarity between, Jon's role, Rhys's role, and really how do you guys actually work together? Because I've been in scenarios where they're colliding. And then it's a matter of, okay, can we separate them into two coaching scenarios versus trying to coach them together? Because then sometimes it's easier to create two outcomes versus one united outcome together. Versus there might just be a whole scenario of coaching where you're just, I disagree with you, and then we're never going anywhere. We almost have to sometimes establish what's the best coaching environment for those people.
Yeah. I've described us as having a confrontational collaboration, which seems to have the best outcomes, right? And so, but from a coaching standpoint, you're right. That might be one room for him, one room for me, and a padded wall in between.
You should hear the stuff he's saying about you in there.
Right? Right?
And in
You're
some
the smart one.
It's interesting in a lot of cases though when we do those one-to-one environments, because it allows you to be more intimate, more vulnerable, because we're always, no matter how close you are as business partners, you're still going to have a sense of perception of, I want to say this, but I don't want Jon to think I'm doing this, or you're doing the same thing. When we do those two individual ones, and then sometimes we bring it together as a team, that's a really good area of opportunity to see also to progress. But there's also an area of like competition for growth, because you might start making a lot of progress. Well, Jon's going to see some of those progresses and really beneficial, and maybe you want to kind of like lean into the process even more throughout the process.
Do you know what? It sounds weird, but if you did that to me, where you had like a sticker chart on who was doing better in coaching, my competitive side would kick in. And I would want more gold stars on my chart than Jon, which is a weird way to hack my brain.
You want to gamify coaching.
If you gamified it and you were like, can you beat Jon? If you do, you're going to get this nice ham. I'd be like, ugh, the ham is mine.
He's probably got theme music to go with this as well,
exactly.
right? It's a gamify coaching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is this stupid thing. I think that, and I spend a lot of time trying to understand it. I actively rebel against kind of even someone trying to teach me something.
Yep.
And I know it's in my own interest, but there's an oppositional side to me where I'm like, no, I have to go and fail for myself and then learn myself is the only way. But then at the same time, if there's a competitive element brought in, it's almost like none of that evaporates. And then I'm like, oh, I've got to be the best. And it's so weird. But I don't, you're pretty competitive though too.
Oh, I'm way too competitive. Everything's a race.
Well, my 13-year-old son wanted to challenge him to pickleball. Yeah. And Jon just sent like laughing emoji. And I said, he's serious? And he never replied. He's too afraid to lose to my 13-year-old son.
No, it won't happen. I can't not compete. I don't know what it is. I get the most enjoyment out of it. But it's interesting. So as partners that both compete, when we've got a common goal, common objective, we don't typically compete against each other. We're always competing either against competition or to do better or to whatever it is. And it seems to be a common goal, right?
Yeah.
So I like that notion of gamifying coaching for you.
But there's two parts that I think are really interesting, and when we're trying to create that dynamic is when you think about how people are predominantly motivated, those are things we'll pull out in their coaching process. They're typically by recognition. That's the number one dominator. How do I get recognition?
Yeah.
The other one's going to be monetary. Like, how do I make more money? So people are fueled by money. The other part is competition. Like, how do you compete? And you kind of have all three, but it's a matter of what's the dominant one. But there's a part that we break into with coaching is you have to have a goal. You have to have a plan. You have to have a measurement system, so scoreboard. And then there needs to be a cadence for accountability and how you pull them all together. And to be honest, that's something we do with every client is we have to have a scoreboard because, well, how are we going to measure our success and progress? There needs to be something we're measuring against because no matter what we do in life, we're either winning or losing. It's just, there's the concept that's there.
Yeah, I thought you were going to touch on the fear of failure a bit because it's actually not into that structure. And I look at Rhys, who moved here from Wales, 5 years ago now? 7 years ago. Wow, right? And that there's no notion of failure. It is just constantly moving forward. Part of what's motivating me is that fear of failure, is I don't want to be in that space. So we've got a different drivers for it, still competitive. Monetization is an interesting one, or money is an interesting one. For us, money awards us freedom, flexibility, all sorts of other things, and we pursue that differently, right? So trying to figure out, we're not thinking about an end paycheck, but we're thinking about the flexibility that the end paycheck would give us, I think, right?
And also I think as well, like we're really proud of like some of we tell important stories. Like, right. There's some of the stories we've told are like so like mind blowing that we had the privilege to work with that community or that organization to tell those stories. So there is an actual there's a sense of achievement, not just monetary, but also the output and the things we get to share with the world as a team and the kind of creative content we make. So there's like, I think that would be a big metric for me is like what stories are we telling, who are we telling those stories for, and what impact are those stories having on the world, which I know is maybe harder to measure and a bit more subjective, but it's up there with money for me, I think. Yeah. And I think those things are all going to be really, really good, especially when monetary side isn't like always the main driver, but it's probably a byproduct of being really good in the competition side. But it's also, too, reinforcing that. How are you competing? How are you competing with yourself? How are you competing as a team? But having like an actual scoreboard, I don't know what you guys are on the sports background, but we almost make that reference with every, type of client that we have is like everybody can get an idea. You go to a hockey game, you can tell who's winning or losing. Well, when we come into an organization, we say, well, how do you know you're winning or losing?
Right.
And most people can tell you that. And then the other part too is they go, well, we do KPIs on a monthly basis. And I'm like, okay, so that'd be like playing a game and you every quarter or every half you check the score.
Well, so that's a great question though. So are we winning?
I don't know. It doesn't feel like we're losing.
Well, right. And
Well,
I'm around soccer a lot, so I accept a tie. but right. So, but it's a great question, winning or losing. And the question becomes against what or against who, right? So Rhys and I are on the same team. And so we're not ever thinking that we're winning or losing against each other. It's against maybe competition or, but our scoreboard is more like, I think it's an acronym like GECKO, like greed, ego, kudos, and opportunity.
Right.
And all of those groups.
I've never heard that one before.
It's our mantra. We talk, it's in the boardroom, and we have got it on our bathroom walls. This is right. GECKO. Greed, ego.
What does that mean?
Well, greed's money.
No, but what's the point of
ego? Is we'll get in psych later.
Did you just make it up, or is it an actual thing?
I'm not that fast.
Okay,
right. An opportunity
you took all that time to think about that.
Since we hit record. This is the only acronym I've come up with.
Okay,
right. But it becomes those scoreboard, a balance for me, obviously, not for Rhys, that is a mixture of opportunity, growth. We love the fact when we can say we're doing a podcast for, say, eBay or NHL is on the wall. So those are the kudos. I can't believe you're doing that kind of stuff, right? So the greed piece is an element, but it's not the driver of it. I'd say its weighting is a different structure. So the scoreboard for us would probably be a complicated scoreboard to say it's a mixture of those opportunities and kudos and et cetera. Right?
My internal scoreboard is messed up as well because I think that my brain will just constantly churn and obsess over everything. So I will be simultaneously winning and losing in multiple areas.
Right.
And I'll just keep going around in my head. So, and then sometimes maybe the good stuff will outbalance the bad stuff and vice versa. But it's usually like 4 or 5 scoreboards and they're being driven around in a circle on the back of trucks, which is no help. I'm sorry.
We've talked about your favorite colors, your internal scoreboard.
So if I could say something about scoreboards that I think is critical is that, we'll go into a lot of organizations, small teams, large teams, medium-sized teams, and it's interesting, they always overcomplicate the scoreboard.
Yeah.
They have way too many measurements and nobody looks at any of them. So what we try and do with the scoreboard is simplify it. Back to the hockey game or soccer game, right? Goals, time, like we have to simplify it, right? So for example, like if you guys are thinking about growth as an objective, if we had a scoreboard, it would be a matter of how many people did you connect with this week? How many meetings did you have? How many people do we have in a proposal stage? Like really simplifying it without kind of like trying to boil the ocean. And because everything you do has a conversion ratio. Like if I have this many calls and I have this many meetings and I send this many proposals, you have this many closed clients. So I think sometimes we just get caught in that 80% that gives us 20% versus when you look at a scoreboard, you should really be simplified to say, I need 10 calls each day or I need 2 meetings each week to get to our objective or our goal.
I once worked at an organization and they had a consultancy firm come in with like this marketing strategy.
Yep.
And it was great. It was page after page, great suggestions, great market insight, market research, recommendations. And it was a long process. They come back and like it was a process of months. It came through and then nobody actioned it. It was almost like nobody ever spoke about it again. And it was expensive.
Yep.
So how do you deal with those organizations? Have you ever been in that situation where you've like taken the time to come up with a thoughtful plan, something you're really proud of, that you're like, this is really going to work, and then like found that it hasn't, like kind of, no one's taken it seriously, even though they invested in it?
Yeah, so awesome question. But to be honest, and I'll be honest, no.
Oh, good.
Reason being is
your scoreboard's great.
I would say we go into a lot of organizations where they've been left a plan by another consulting firm, and they're like, it's like putting a barbecue together with no directions. So it's more like they got the toolbox and then the company left. So we're kind of like extracting the toolbox in some cases. But the difference between what we do versus what a lot of others do is that instead of us leaving the toolbox, we build the toolbox with the client. So for example, that marketing company, they might have had a master plan, but if they built it with the company instead of for the company, there would have been a lot of different sense of ownership and accountability around it. Then instead of it being a short engagement, what we try and do is we try and extend the engagement so we can be part of the actual implementation. I think that's where a lot of organizations miss around strategy is you might build the right strategy, but if you leave during implementation, that's when you really are starting to build new habits, new structures, and you really need to be there to be that sounding board, that accountability structure to really make sure that you're building that cadence and building that
Yeah.
structure.
Okay.
I think that's hypercritical. I think if organizations are building a plan and just giving it to you, I would run for the hills.
Right. To me, it's not about a good plan, right? It's the execution of a good plan.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge as you move people around, the implementation piece, right? And the buy-in of that. I can't say triggered. You made me think back to one of my better sales bosses that said, you've got two choices here in that sales funnel, from the activity when you talked about touch points, to presentations, to dialogues, to close ratios. There's only one spot I can choose to manage you, either on the input or on the output, and then manage the ratios. He was the first person to introduce me to that structure. You and I talked about that at length about
I don't
focusing.
remember anything.
Right, from a sales standpoint, right, which is everything from, if I've got 100 leads and typically I get to 10 presentations and my close ratio is 1,
Yep.
I'll get a close for every 100 people. And if I want 2 closes, guess what? I've got to talk to 200 people, right? So it's managing that kind of structure, right?
Yeah.
So I hear you on those processes. That's a few years ago that I would have heard that kind of structure. But yeah, it sounds like you're back to that solution engineer, process engineer, talking about
100%.
understanding how our business would work, implementing a plan, and then sort of getting buy-in from the key people in the company.
Well, how many times do you talk or sit down with somebody and they're talking about an output? I want to accomplish this year. I want to do these things. And they're all outputs. So the immediate question should be, what do you need to do on a daily basis to achieve that? So we use this concept called winning the day. What does winning the day look like when you're actually trying to work towards those objectives? So inputs drive outputs. You're 100% right on that. And I remember after university, moved to the States and knocked doors. Not glamorous, but really good for sales. But it was funny. I used to go out and I said, I want to do 2 sales today. But it's funny, as you got deeper into the season, you got those concepts of inputs drive outputs. It was, I need to knock 200 doors today because I know 100 doors leads to 1 sale. So it's a change, because then it flips your engagement level on, I need to keep moving forward on the input side because that's what's going to get us to the output. And that just changes your control over growth versus sometimes you're always looking at the output. You just feel like you're losing control over it.
Yeah. I'm hearing a bunch of really good things. One is that we don't know what our inputs or expected outputs are.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what success looks like, and we don't really have a scoreboard to sort of measure those key goals, right? So when you asked us,
It's a bleak picture that you're
are we
painting,
winning
Jon.
or are we losing? My gut is we're winning, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not sure what we're competing against. Or
Yeah.
who,
It feels like we're winning, but it's entirely based on gut.
I have some notions of who we're beating.
Ourselves a year ago. I'm a big
Actually, that's a great
I'm a
idea.
big fan
Yep.
of measuring
Yep.
yourself against how you
Yep.
were rather than
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
peak.
trajectory. Love it.
Yeah. It's less about like, are we doing better than we did last year, or
Yeah.
are we doing better than we did last month, versus like, what's that person doing over there? Because you can't get in somebody else's head.
Yeah.
But I like reminding myself that they're because I'm competitive. But then I can only achieve, like, force change by being better myself. So, which is weird because I don't usually have strategies.
So, David, I have a word question for you.
Yeah, please.
You've recently written a book.
Yeah.
Everything you know, can we just get from the book?
I would say that's going to be the tip of the iceberg for some of the stuff, but I think we bring a bunch of concepts in there that are really kind of challenge the way you're thinking. A lot of good questions, a lot of good quotes, but every chapter has things you can work on inside of that chapter. So you get an element of like what a coaching environment would look like with us. But the goal is always to kind of read the book and then, call us up and we'll help you make the change.
I did, and you know that we're in the audio space. I did notice it's an audio book as well.
It is, yeah.
So I don't know if you want to do a bit of a shout out to the name of the book, where you can find it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So it's called Radical Growth. It's on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and Audible. And we did it through an incredible publisher called Scribe. It was a journey to do that. But the Radical is Radicle. And a lot of people, it's funny, when we were promoting the book, they're like, people really close to me, they're like, I think you spelled the title wrong. Did the publisher tell you that? And I was like, oh, you know what? So we've been doing this for the last while, and it's been really helpful for us, is that Radical is actually the first stage that a seed takes when it breaks through the shell and plants its initial root. Because we say this all the time, that as leaders, innovators, anybody, we're always planting seeds, like new ideas. And if we don't see an immediate result, surface level, we give up on it. But we always say, well, where does the seed grow? It grows under the ground. It's establishing roots. So sometimes growth's happening, we just can't see it. So a big part about coaching is like building the habit, sticking to the process, really persevering. So we really fell in love with the idea around Radical. And it's actually funny, when we ran our coaching program, we start giving everybody seeds at the start of the coaching program because it takes about 6 months to go through the process. So we do this with bigger companies to do the coaching culture side. And our goal was to say, after the program's over, when you get your certification, everybody bring their plant back in. We want to see what level it's at, because the thing is, just like coaching, you have to make that intentional focus on nurturing, watering, growing, put it in the right environments. And it was wild because half them brought back dead plants or no plants.
I'd be in that category without a doubt. Yeah. How'd you like to come to my house to die? That's amazing.
Yeah, I am keeping your plants alive.
Jon, there's plants in my office, and Jon comes in and does stuff to them.
This is still partnership balance. This is important.
My house is full
seeds,
of plastic plants.
Right. So. And we'd actually talked about that. I think you had an analogy for our sales funnel in regards to planting seeds to the saplings.
Seed sapling trees.
Seed sapling trees.
Sawdust.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a similar notion. So I guess the last thing that I want to ask, which is usually your question, which is looking for the freebie or the seedling of...
I just wanted to say first, though, I came to your book launch, shook your hand, and then I had to go pick my son up. But it was great. I'm sorry I was only there to shake your hand.
Oh my gosh, no worries.
It was like a flying visit.
So ask your freebie question.
Yeah. If there's like one nugget of information that we or our listeners can take away, and some people don't answer this question because they say they can't, but is there one little thing you can give us that maybe we can take away and try this week that would make us better?
Yeah. So I would really send you guys like a set of questions to kind of go through. But I think one theme just from our conversation today would be really like, what does winning look like? And I think like, look, there's qualitative, there's quantitative side. I think if you guys really had a clear, measurable, idea around what winning looks like for each of you, and then as the company, I think you could kind of break it down, the company, the team, and individually. If you had that clearly to do it, and Jon brought up a really good point, winning, part of that is going to be an output. Now it's a matter of going, what behaviors would it take to get to that win on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and really build a plan around that. And there's a really good quote from Chris Voss from Never Split the Difference. And he said, yes is nothing without how. And so the whole idea around, if you guys have a clear yes, which is going to be, what does winning mean to you guys? Then it's a matter of reinforcing what's your how. And we're always happy to jump in for a discovery session to help you guys find your how, because that's really what we care most about when we go through coaching. Is we get a lot of people that are very clear on, here's where we want to go. That's why we help them kind of build the steps along the way. But I would say my action item for you guys right away would be define what winning looks like.
Yeah, I think it's a really good insight for us. We often forget to celebrate success, and I think it's because we haven't identified the success. Yeah, and it's comparative. We look at last year, the last 2 years, the last 3 years. I can't imagine where we are now 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean? But we never once say we're here. We're not done yet, right? So that notion of celebrating success, it's like we're not quite sure where that end goal is.
And the ham is mine.
The ham is yours. Congratulations.
Yeah, but I think to your point, Jon, though, when you know what a win's like, you're able to recognize it differently because you feel like there's going to be a lot of milestones along the way. So you get to enjoy the journey a bit more than always never feeling like you're seeing the destination.
Yeah. Right? I mean, we're scoring points. We're scoring goals. We got good defense. We're winning a game, but we haven't won the game, right? So that's that journey notion for us, right? So
nobody ever wins. There's always another season.
Well, I think you win when you're done.
When your knees package.
Right.
Thanks, Dave. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. No, this is great. I love the idea. And again, I hope you guys find your coach or you become coachable.
Right. Thanks a lot, Dave. Appreciate
Absolutely.
The best place to find this podcast is wherever you find podcasts.
That's where I'd start.